Hey, this is Peter Stickles, and you might know me from Shortbus, and you're watching Crash and Bleed.
So, some people might say actors are real artists. They deep dive straight into that craft. Was that the case for you? What drew you in?
I guess so, but I always knew I wanted to do things that scared me because things that scared me excited me, and I loved watching horror movies as a kid, and these movies genuinely freaked me out. I mean, I would lose sleep because I'd be so freaked out by these movies, but something about that really lit a fire in my belly. And that's kind of what was the driving force behind me wanting to be an actor. I wanted to do something that just terrified me. And Shortbus was definitely that. So when I read about the Sex Film Project, which is what Shortbus was called, the sexfilmproject.com, I thought, my God, this is terrifying. I want to do it. That was my mindset.
So, what were some of the standout films for you that had an impact?
Well, then they're still my favorite movies to this day. I love Jaws. I loved Aliens. Creature features for me are really exciting. They're really important to me. That I love them. I'm a big collector of props, and I loved Boogie Nights was a big deal for me. Showgirls, and Gremlins, specifically Gremlins 2.
Okay, see, that's my favourite horror comedy, Gremlins 2. Even though people shit all over that one sometimes,
Same.
it's my absolute favourite.
Same.
And I think the Spider Gremlin is like the most iconic villain of all time.
Well, it's funny you mention that. I'm a big prop collector. I own the Spider Gremlin. I have the actual prop. I have the puppet, the full size, life sized Spider Gremlin puppet from Gremlins 2. I have it. It's mine. Yeah.
You'll have to send pictures of that.
Take a beat. I'll send you some photos. It's the actual puppet used in Gremlins 2.
The garage.
It's in my garage.
Okay, so I had like the striped teddy bear that was reversible, so you'd pull out the life size Gremlin. Yeah. But you actually have something that was in the film.
Yeah. It's massive. It's gigantic. I actually kind of messed up when I saw the auction. I didn't quite get a good look. I didn't quite pay attention to the dimensions. So when the thing arrived, when I won the auction and the thing arrived, it was way too big for my house that I was in. I couldn't fit it anywhere. It was kind of a problem. So it now lives at Tom Devlin's Monster Museum, just outside of Vegas. And he's Tom Devlin's a good friend of mine, and he was willing to take it, so it's on display there now. So it's not on my property right now, but I still own it, and it's in a museum. And there's a little plaque that says it's from me, and I donated it there, and yeah. So it's still mine. I still own it, but he's housing it for me right now because it's huge. I'll send you some pictures of it. And I'll send you some videos of it because you won't. It was massive.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Rick Baker, who created it, he created all the Gremlins from Gremlins 2. When he retired, he auctioned off a lot of the stuff, like in his garage, like just his stuff. So it was part of his auction. I got it. I won it through him.
Okay. Well, okay. So who would you say was the most iconic villain of all time?
I think the most iconic villain of all time is Chucky. But I know I was going to say I'm in the minority there, but I don't think I am. I think he's pretty iconic. I think a lot of people love him. I think he's the best. He's my favorite.
Yeah, that film was a big deal for the UK.
The first one?
All of them.
Okay.
Even the later, sillier ones, they still get talked about here.
Yeah. Speaking of horror villains, are you familiar with the Ginger Dead Man?
It rings a bell.
This is the Ginger Dead Man. Because I was in the Ginger Dead Man Part 3, and this is the Ginger Dead Man. He's a gingerbread man cookie who comes alive and those people. These are just at my disposal, like within arm's reach right here. This is from Alien Resurrection. Remember Alien
Oh,
Resurrection? That's the
yeah.
queen alien giving birth to the newborn alien. This is a Freddy glove. This is a glove that's was made from. It was inspired by Nightmare on Elm Street 2, which is one of my more favorite Freddy's.
I
So
had
this one
that.
was inspired by part 2.
I had that glove.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was like the kids' version. It was rubber.
Oh, yeah, like the plastic version. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I didn't have you down as a horror fan originally, but you're
Yeah,
like fanatical about this stuff.
I like being scared. I think it's exciting. I think they're fun. I think you're seeing something like The Substance right now getting a rise in popularity, and people are taking horror a little more seriously right now because I think they can be pretty profound. They can be really inspiring. And then you got all your horror icons, which are like rock stars. It's almost saying like, why is rock and roll so exciting? Why is rock and roll so fun? I mean, they're very similar in a way, Um, and I don't know. I've always just been drawn to being scared, or even more so like being scared and laughing, like Gremlins 2. Like horror comedies for me are even more fun. I like gore. I like the gross out stuff. I mean, that's always been fun for me.
So, were there any controversial films that had any kind of an impact back then? Like, as you say, you wanted to do stuff that scared you, pushed you out of your comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe it was seeing real sex on film that eventually pushed you into doing something like Shortbus.
I mean, I definitely sought it out as a kid. I'm going back to like going to video stores when I was a kid, and there'd be like the adult section that'd be in the back that it was very forbidden to go in. And I knew there was something very naughty in there and something very dangerous in there and something kind of exciting in there. So of course I wanted to go in there, but I couldn't. And then as I got a little older, when I was a teen, there was a video store near me where I grew up, and I remember there was one lady that worked there that would allow me to rent R-rated movies, even though I wasn't supposed to rent R-rated movies as a kid. And so I would rent movies that I knew would have, like a nipple. Like that's all it took. Like if I could see like any sort of body, it was so exciting for me. So I would rent movies like um The Cook, The Thief, His Wife and Her Lover, or I'd rent like Emmanuel, or I'm trying to think of some other sort of like naughty, dirty movies that would sort of just be exciting. I would watch, like, we didn't have Cinemax, but I would watch Cinemax like on Scramble, because even though it was scrambled and I couldn't see anything, I knew like it was just sort of very forbidden, and maybe I would see something kind of exciting. Um, so yeah, that's that, that was like sort of the driving force behind doing things like Shortbus.
Yeah. So how did the sex film project get onto your radar? Because that's what it was originally called at the time.
Yeah, it was. So I was living in New York at the time, and it was in Time Out New York, which was a weekly sort of free newspaper that you just pull off the street, like out of these sort of bins. It's called Time Out New York, and in the back of it, there was an ad that said, John Cameron Mitchell, who just did Hedwig and the Angry Inch, he's doing a new movie, and right now we're calling it the Sex Film Project. And it said, go to the website sexfilmproject.com for more information. And that alone was very exciting because we had internet, and we had, like, I think I knew of websites, but it was very new. So I can remember typing in the sexfilmproject.com, and there was instructions like, if you want to we're doing this movie and there's going to be real sex in it. And if you want to be considered, send in a tape of you talking about a meaningful sexual experience in your life. And I went and I rented like a camcorder, a V8. Like this was the tape days. So this was 2001. Okay. And I rented a camcorder because, yeah, very similar to that, with like a high 8 tape. And I think, yeah. I rented one because I didn't have one. I rented a tripod, and I propped it up in front of me in my apartment, and I sort of talked into the camera. And then I press eject, and I slid the tape in the mail, and that was it. There was no editing. There was no nothing. There was no fan. I don't think I even saw what I looked like because I couldn't see anything. And I just sent it away. And later, talking to John about that, he said there was, because I think I talked about like going to sex clubs at the time, but not really participating, just kind of like watching from like the side, like just sort of not really participating, just and he liked the idea of someone sort of watching, someone who like represented the audience, someone who represented the everyman who was kind of the periphery, like just sort of reaching and reaching, reaching, but just maybe not quite touching, And he really liked that story, so that's why he responded to it, and that's why I got called in. And then the audition process was just crazy. And looking back now, I'm like, I can't believe I did that, but it was really really exciting at the time.
Yeah. So I'm going to imagine that you were about 24, 25 when you went through the audition process for Shortbus.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah,
Yeah. And had you done much work before that?
I did. My first movie was Cemetery Gates, which was a monster movie that's shot in LA, and I did that before Short Bus. And it was interesting because I was cast in Short Bus before doing Cemetery Gates, but the production of Short Bus was always very start and stop. I mean, we got cast in Short Bus in like early 2002, and we would, he John, the director, he cast all of us first before there was even a script because he wanted to develop the script with us, you know. And so we were cast. We started developing these scripts through these workshops that he would provide, and that were based in New York City. And this process took years, years. And
Well, let me
and then we
stop you
every
right
once in
there.
a while,
Let me stop you there
yeah,
because that was, I think, 2004, 2005 when the film was being shot. So we are in the
yeah,
20th anniversary of shooting the
yeah.
film right now.
That's right. It's this summer. We shot in the summer of 2005, and it was supposed to be shot, well before then. But these distributors would come in, and or not distributors, but these financiers would come in and talk about how they wanted to finance it. But then a lot of, honestly, I think a lot of people got scared. I think a lot of people, at the end of the day, wanted to see this movie, but they didn't want to put money into it because it was dangerous and they didn't know what to think, and it had never been done really in the United States. I mean, out in Europe, that using sex in movies has been done for decades, centuries, and but in the United States, the only time real sex had been used in movies is porn, and that's really it. There wasn't anything else. So people had a hard time when they would hear about something like Short Bus, it was automatically like, oh, you're making a porn. And it was John that was like, no, 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 this is going to be something different. Yes, we're using real sex, but it's not going to be pornography. Pornography is meant to like excite. Pornography is meant to arouse, and that's really it. And that's fine. But he wanted to use it in a way that didn't necessarily excite. I mean, the sex in Short Bus is not exciting. It's not really very often very hot because he wanted to showcase sex in ways that it was in real life, where, a lot of times it's bad, or, a lot of times it's sad, a lot of times it's kind of weird. Or so that's what excited him. But that was a hard message to get out in 2002, to financiers. So finally we got I think it was called QTV that financed it. And then we were off and running in 2005.
So it seems like on the DVD, at least in the UK, it's Universal, that Universal logo that comes up at the beginning. When did they get attached? Maybe
I
after the
had
film
no
was
I
done.
I had no idea that's the first time I'm hearing that Universal had any involvement in that. I didn't know. It was always for us like Fortissimo, QTV, and Think Film were our producers.
Right. So that might just be
And
a UK thing.
maybe that's exciting if Universal had something to do with it. Wow.
Yeah. Well, in every interview with John Cameron, he talks about punk rock, like the way this was shot was very punk rock. Was punk rock
Hmm.
as important to you as it is to me and
Yeah.
John Cameron?
Personally, not so much. No. I mean, in the 90s, maybe No, that was much more of a John thing. And I got to say, even during the production of Shortbus, there wasn't much of a punk rock element. It was more like, we watched a lot of like Roger Altman movies and, Cassavetes movies. He was more into like having us get a feel of how he wanted Shortbus to look in his eyes.
Yeah.
I can see by your shirt that you're a punk rock fan.
So you never got into punk then, not even any of the radio friendly stuff?
No,
No.
not really. No, Green Day maybe. That's about
Yeah.
it.
That's
Yeah, it
okay.
doesn't really count. Yeah, you must be a Hedwig fan then, right?
Obviously, you see John Cameron in the punk rock shirt with in Hedwig.
Yeah.
That film didn't hit me the same way because that's not
Oh,
really
interesting.
my world. Like I can't relate to any of the characters. It's really well done. I do like the film because it's John and
Hmm.
I like everything that John does. But Shortbus
Yeah.
was the thing that just hits you straight in the veins. It's in my DNA somehow. You know what I mean?
Wow. Yeah, that's
Yeah, because
exciting.
I can relate to
Well,
every character.
you can. What did you see it when it was out theatrically when it came out in 2006,
I think
or did you see it,
I think I was
or did you see it
17.
like later? Okay.
I think it was 2007 when I saw it for the first time.
Oh, so you saw it on DVD?
Yeah. So let me
Yeah.
just explain like how I got exposed to it. So in the UK, Channel 4 would run things like the most controversial movies ever made, and sometimes it's
Hmm.
controversial because of like a reference to the war or something political or something boring, something that's not
Sure.
quite
Sure.
exciting. But that's how I got exposed to real sex on film, and I'm a teenager, like I'm looking to jack off, so I'm like,
Sure. Sure.
this is very exciting. This appeals to me. I
Yeah.
end up discovering all these really great movies, and Short Buzz is one of those movies that I was looking to jack off to. I thought,
Right.
I've scored a dirty movie, but I end up not doing that because of how much the film impacted me early on.
Right.
Like, this is an incredible, life-changing film for a lot of people,
Yeah.
and I know it was for me.
Hmm.
By the end of it, I'm applauding at the TV.
Yeah. No, I hear you. That's exciting, and that's good to hear. And I'll say this too. I have a feeling that it was more of a European reaction than it was an American reaction. Because when we went to Cannes to premiere this movie, we all flew out there, and it was very exciting. And the French just threw us up on their shoulders and were celebrating us because they could kind of see past all the sexual elements and see the story, because it sounds like that it was it impacted you as well, and you didn't get super distracted by the sexual elements, and that has to be something to do with being in the UK and American. It was very different here. It was more like this is a pornographic, this is a porn. um this is very sort of naughty, and it wasn't as celebrated like as much like it was in Europe.
Well, are there any examples of American films that come to mind that did use real sex before Short Bus?
Yeah. Something like, well, I don't know if it was real sex, but there was certainly a lot of like, like the Brown Bunny, Irreversible, In the Realm of the Senses, although that wasn't an American movie. These are movies that I guess use bits of real sex in them, but I don't know if Irreversible even was real sex. It was also not an American movie. American movies, very few that I can think of. Really, just Brown Bunny, or I don't know. I can't think of any. Can you think of any other besides American ones?
See, I wasn't prepared for my own question there. There's
No,
got
no,
to
it's
be
okay. That's
some.
good.
There's got to be some,
No, there
though.
are. Okay, it's funny. It's funny you mentioned like these lists that you see. Like, here's the top. I see them on the internet all the time. Like the top 10, most controversial movies with real. And I look at them all the time because I always look for see if Short Bus is on there, and a lot of times it is. And then I'll see other movies on there. I'm like, oh yeah, I've seen those movies, and oh yeah, I'll give that movie a peek. But um, not many American movies. They're usually from other countries.
Well, so for some of these people that got onto the sex film project, they ended up dropping out early on because of the sex and the fear of what that might do to their career. Like, were you seeing this up close and personal?
Yes, for sure. I was scared. No one knew what was going to happen to our careers. Um, so when the audition process started, I think out of the however many, I think a couple hundred submissions that John got, he narrowed it down to about 40 or 50 people that he was interested in, and he flew everybody in city wherever they were in the country or the world. He brought these 50 people into New York. He rented out a theater, and we all sat in this theater and we watched all of the submitted videotapes. And that's where I felt like a bit of a putz because, like I said, I just put up a camera in front of myself and I talk like an idiot, you know? Some people made like beautiful short films, like productions, edited, lights, you know, and I was like a story, a script. And I'm watching these things. I'm like, oh my God, this is so cool. People really put a lot of effort in it. And they showed my video and I was really kind of embarrassed. And then from that 40, he narrowed it down to like to about 15 of us, and then narrowed that down to about seven of us, and we were the core seven. And I think there was a lot of because I mean, you know, I was an aspiring actor. There weren't of that crew though. There were maybe three or four aspiring actors. A lot of the other people weren't necessarily actors. He didn't, you know, John didn't necessarily want actors. He wanted just people, you know. So of us who were actors, we hadn't done much. We were just kind of starting off. So were we worried about it? Yeah, we were worried about it affecting us. Did it affect us? I don't know. It could have. It could have affected us. It's hard to say. Um, I know that I personally didn't have a very graphic sex scene. It was scripted. I was supposed to.
Oh,
Yeah, and yeah, I was supposed to, and I was ready to go. And it was we were on the day about to shoot it. I remember the producer coming out of the set and saying, you know, we're not going to shoot your sex scene graphically, Peter. And I was like equal parts relieved and equal parts like kind of annoyed, you know? I was like, what do you mean? I've been doing this. Uh, but ultimately, I was relieved because, I mean, you know, I didn't have to perform. And I remember thinking maybe had I done like a more graphic sex scene, it would have affected me differently professionally. Who knows? It's impossible to say. It's impossible to say.
yeah. Well, I haven't heard of many films using the workshop process,
Yeah.
like to improvise the script. Was this a case of like you all got to create your own characters, or was this prearranged by John and you worked together?
It was a bit of column A and a bit of column B for sure. It you know, well, first of all, you know, the workshop process it was used a lot back in the 70s. Again, more so like in Europe, not so much in the US, you know, where people would get together and sort of develop these things together as a group. But it hadn't been done in the US. Bef- I mean, I can't think of a time it had done before Shortbus. Um, so he rented like a loft in Manhattan, and we would all go there, seven or eight of us, and yeah, we would sort of do you know improv games, and we'd flesh out these sort of characters together. And John would sort of challenge us with like you know different scenarios and through these sort of games that we'd play, really, we would start developing characters. And then in the downtime, we would just watch movies. He'd have us watch different movies, and that would kind of get us inspired to, you know. And then I remember he at the sort of the once we kind of fleshed out these people, he's like, okay, I'm gonna sit you all down and I'm gonna pretend I'm interviewing you, kind of like what we're doing right now. He's like, and I'm gonna interview you and I'm gonna interview as your character. And that I remember very vividly that he would sit me down and be like, so Caleb, tell me about what do you do for a living? You know? And that's when the whole you know, this my character's whole backstory sort of got cut from the finished product. I was like, I worked for the president of the United States, and I worked, yeah. So that's kind of when that came. I'm like, oh, what do I do for a living? Well, it's funny you ask. I'm actually the personal assistant to the Bush twins. And I don't even remember how that came out. The problem. I think the problem with a lot of these, a lot of things like that got cut because they were funny to us in the moment. After years of workshopping, we kind of came up with these inside jokes and these things that kind of were funny at the time, like me being the personal assistant to the Bush twins, that cracked us up. But when we finally, once it was finally scripted and shot, and then test audiences saw it, it was very confusing to the first test audiences. They didn't understand like, they thought maybe the Bush twins would eventually like show up. There was no
Yeah.
like real payoff.
I just wanted to like express that I wish your scenes, like the deleted scenes, I wish they had made it into the film because they are some of the
Uh,
funniest scenes.
they are funny, but it didn't make sense in the context of the movie. Plus, the movie was too long. We thought it was hilarious, but sometimes inside jokes don't really translate. So we had to cut that out.
Well, do you think that you were kind of creating a creepy character? Because I don't think it does come
Mhm.
across as creepy, but it technically is because you are watching this couple.
That's interesting. I hadn't ever really thought of that. Yeah, it is creepy. I mean, a voyeur is, sort of a glorified peeping tom. Um, I mean, I don't think he's a bad person or a creepy person, but I think what he is doing is pretty creepy. Yeah, you're right. Maybe something in, kind of inherently came out of me during that process, and I created this creepy character. I'm kind of proud of that, actually.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't feel creepy when you're watching it because it's so beautifully done. You know what I mean? It's like it's so raw, so
Yeah,
human.
he represents the audience, and that was once I kind of realized that it kind of clicked in my brain that I was going to be the person sort of just watching behind the potted plant, um, and that was exciting for me. We had another character that was cut out, that was also very similar. Um, he was gonna go around like interviewing everyone in the film throughout the movie. He was gonna have this big microphone in his hand, and I remember he always wore a big bow tie, and he was gonna go around and like ask all the characters questions in the scenes about like how they're feeling or what are they doing, and that became a little sort of meta and maybe sort of didn't work. And so I think between him and I, we were going to represent the audience, but then he got cut out fully.
Since you say you're a prop collector, did you keep any props from Shortbus that you have to show off?
Well, I have this right here. This is my backpack that I wore in Short Bus.
Okay.
It, this is the backpack that I wore when I was running around the short bus room, and as I was like running all over the streets, running after everybody, I was wearing this backpack.
That's when you almost got hit by a buzz as well when you were going across the street.
Yes, yeah, yeah, I really did. I remember sort of getting yelled at because I just sort of like ran out into the street without really looking. There was a lot in my mind that day. I wasn't thinking straight.
Well, I think it was after the workshop process. People had been cast in the film at this point. Two very important actors drop out on the same day, and John takes it pretty rough. He even breaks down crying on the bonus features of the DVD. Can you talk
Yeah,
a
I was gonna
little
say,
bit?
how do you know? I was gonna say, how do you know all this?
I'm wondering
you,
as well.
you,
Do we have the same DVD? I wonder if there's different bonus
no, you
features.
do. No, you're totally right. I'm just wondering, like, oh, were you there? Yeah. It
So could you talk a little bit about how that affected the story changing, if it did?
Well, one of them dropped out. She pulled out on her own. It wasn't that like she was cut or anything. There was one character that left the production, and then Lindsay Beamish, who played Severn the Dominatrix, was cast and was sort of took over that role. So Lindsay wasn't involved in a workshop process. So she came in later. She was cast once this other girl dropped out. And then the other character was the bow tie one with a microphone interviewing everybody. He oh, and then now I'm remembering there was a third guy. That was the most upsetting one because he was with us through the whole production. His name was Mike, and he was with us throughout the whole workshop. And his character got cut out because it just became way too big of a script. After, like I said, like after a workshopping and we became friends and we had all these inside jokes and it became like this whole world. Then it became like, oh, now we have to like kind of, now it's a production. Now there's money. Now there's a script. Now there's parameters. Now we just can't do anything we want. Now there's a running time. Like we had to make some real. I mean, my whole backstory got cut. I remember John took me out to dinner because he was like heartbroken, and he like confessed to me. He's like, because we had already shot everything. He's like, listen, well, this whole backstory has to be cut down, and I'm so sorry. And not only that, but we have to go back and do reshoots because we have to make your character make sense now. And that I didn't mind my character's like sort of backstory being cut out, but what I did have a hard time was with going back and doing reshoots because I didn't even know about that as an actor back then. I didn't know that you did that. All I know is we did this movie as a team in the summer. It was awesome. And then we had to go back and do reshoots, and it felt sort of like very sort of like clinical, and it just felt like ugly and technical and Hollywood and silly and stupid, and I hated it. I hated going back and doing those reshoots because it didn't feel like we weren't. It wasn't a family thing anymore. And I remember Paul Dawson, who was the guy. So all that stuff, like with the sex scene with me and Paul at the end, that was all reshoots. And I remember Paul had since cut his hair because he didn't know about reshoots either. So they had to put like extensions in his hair. So they put all these extensions hanging down up so like his hair matched. And I remember like touching the back of his head and like feeling these extensions in his hair. And I was like, oh God, it just everything felt so like fake. And that part I didn't like.
Well, Suk Yin almost drops out of the film because of the sex and maybe fear of losing her job until the Canadian government allowed it to happen. Like, I don't understand that. Like, how did the government know about this movie?
You probably know as much as I do about that. She was a very famous Canadian VJ, like for like the Canadian MTV, which was called Much Music. She was a VJ on that channel, and they were very upset with her um, doing this movie. So I don't know if she was threatened to be. No, I think she was threatened to be fired, and then all these sort of celebrities kind of came out of the woodworks and like wrote these letters of support for Sukyin. People like Moby and Julianne Moore and all these like really kind of cool people like swung into her, and it worked. And they sort of gave Sukyin their blessing. Yeah.
But what did the government have to do with it?
That's a good question. I don't I didn't know that it was an issue with the government. I knew it was an issue with Much Music, her job. I didn't. I don't know. Maybe John knows. I'm not sure. We didn't. We didn't know much about that when it was happening in on the day in New York.
Well, it seems that you had many fascinating people as sextras in this film. Did you get to meet many of them? Have you stayed in contact?
Yes, I was on set for a lot of those Sextras days. You know, so films are shot out of order, obviously, that, and so like sometimes we get the call sheets of when we were needed on set, and those days that were the Sextras were being shot, I also had scenes shot, so I was there for a lot of that, and I became friends with a few of them. And do you remember there was the couple, we called them the beautiful couple? They were the couple that Sookian like would look and idolize, and they were beautiful. And I was in touch with those two for a long time afterwards. I haven't talked to them in a bit, but I know if I needed to like sort of reach out to them, I could. Um, I'm trying to think if there were others.
And they're still together to this day.
No, they're not. They're not still
Oh.
together to this day. No, they've since broke up. Um, but Paul and PJ are still together.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they
Okay.
were a couple. They came on as a couple. They were already a couple before the production of Shortbus. Yeah, and they're
Yeah.
still. PJ's now a cop. He's a cop. They live in Florida. Yeah, I went to visit them maybe 5 years ago. So that's the last time I saw them.
Well, since you bring up cops, I mean, there was places like the original Dumba. I heard that like these were like art collectives that would have
Yeah,
orgies and stuff like that, and punk rock shows as well. A lot of that was
yeah.
connected. The cops would shut a lot of those places down. Like from what I understand, was that the case on this film? Were you witnessing places like that being shut down?
Well, I don't know about the Dumbo ones. Like, there were those salons that existed in Dumbo, and we shot in one of the areas. Yeah. I mean, I never heard of cops shutting them down. Not in New York. Maybe in other parts of the world, but I never heard of that happening in New York.
Okay. Well, the beautiful couple, as you call them,
Yeah.
I hear from the commentary that they were like fire jugglers. So were
Yeah.
they circus performers? Did they come from that scene?
Yeah, they were. I think she worked in burlesque. Um, she was fascinating. I love her. She's really remarkable. Uh, and I forget what he did, but it wouldn't surprise me if he sort of was some sort of performer, um, acrobat, maybe. I can't remember what he did. But they were really extraordinarily beautiful in real life too. They're the kind of couple where you just like see them and you're like, fuck you for being so perfect, Like, get out of here. Come on. You can't be that great. There's got to be something wrong with you guys.
Well, what do you think the importance was for using real sex in this film? Because Shanti wanted to have a real orgasm, and
Yeah.
so did Sukyin. By the end,
Yeah.
did that become important over the shoot that these things need to really be visibly happening?
It was important to them. I think that the sex was important because it was going to be used, as a metaphor throughout the film. And that's why you saw almost all the graphic sex is really at the beginning of the movie, because he wanted to showcase it at the beginning to be like, okay, this is the language we're going to use throughout the film. So we're going to give it to you at the beginning. And that's kind of why my sex scene at the end of the movie didn't make sense. And that's kind of why it was cut and wasn't shot explicitly, because to see me at the end of the movie like banging away at this guy would have made no sense. And then it would have been just exploitative, at the end. Then it would have just been for shock value. So it made sense that it wasn't shot in an explicit manner at the end. So really, all of it is the beginning and midway through when we see like the sextras. Now, as far as like Suk Yin wanting to have an orgasm for real, that was just sort of her own journey. And I get it. We were so into it. We were so like excited to be involved into something that was so unique and new. I think she just wanted to give it a shot and make it as authentic as possible. John wanted to have a sex scene. John Mitchell, like he kept telling us he was going to have a sex scene and have sex with a woman for the first time ever in the movie.
He sort of did though. He was in the sex not bombs room.
He does like he performs like oral sex on this woman.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was the first time he had ever done that.
Do you know if he's done it since?
I doubt it. I see him pretty regularly. He's one of them that I've stayed in touch with, and I see him at least once a year now. And whenever he's in town or I'm in New York, we always make a point of seeing each other.
Yeah.
So we've remained really close. And I would be very surprised if he had any sort of sexual encounter with a woman. That'd be very surprising.
Well, what were the safety precautions? Like, I'm curious to know about those orgy scenes. Like,
It,
everyone got checked out, obviously.
yeah, it was all. I think it was all personal. I believe that if someone hadn't some sort of like wanted to express a safety precaution with their partner, they would figure it out themselves. Like for instance, like Jan and Shanti, they were couples, so they would have unprotected sex. And if someone felt like they were okay with having unprotected sex, they would. It's interesting because Then you have someone like Raph and Suk-yin, who were not a couple in real life, but were playing a couple in the movie, and they have a sex scene, so they clearly probably wouldn't be using protection. But the actors themselves, Raph and Suk-yin, are not a couple, and they wanted to use protection. So how do you shoot, a married couple having sex without protection? And that's in the commentary too. I'm sure you saw where they show like Raph has like the condom on his penis, and they're trying to like use makeup to like cover it up. It's so silly, so silly. I
And
think they ended up using a female condom that
which
Suk-yin.
I'd never heard of that before in my life.
I had heard of it. I didn't think anyone actually ever that it was actually used ever, but I think that's what they used.
Yeah. Where's Raphael now?
He is like in the Bay Area, the San Francisco area. He's married with a couple kids.
He's not still acting or anything like that.
No, I don't think so. No.
Well, one of the many reasons that this film just hit me so hard was because like I suffer from severe loneliness and I struggle to connect. So there's a disconnect with every character, every main character, and I see that especially in Severin with the longing for something and trying to fill the emptiness in her life. Like
Hmm.
that's me. Like I see myself in that character. So. What were you feeling at that time? Were you lonely? Is that why you became a voyeur?
Wow. I hadn't thought of it that way. I No, I wasn't lonely. I was it's something about the idea of just sitting. Geez, I wonder if it does sort of stem from a bit of loneliness. I mean, I never felt that sort of feeling of lonely like you just described, where like I didn't have friends. If I had friends that I could count on. I've always done things on my own though. My personal life has always been very important to me. I do still go to the movies by myself. I go to concerts by myself. But it doesn't come from a place of loneliness. That's just I think that's just me, and I prefer I think to do things on my own. I like sort of making my own decisions and being like, if I'm going to go do this now, I can go do this. If I want to leave the concert early, I can go. I don't have to answer to anybody. Um, and I think going and exploring these sex clubs at the time, when I was right before I did Shortbus, it was. Well, I mean, I was definitely a horny little fucker back then too, But it wasn't about having sex with anyone there. That's really fascinating. I hadn't ever thought about could that have been like loneliness, but I don't think so. I think it was more just it was more just excitement because I feel like if it was lonely, I wouldn't want to be around people so much. I mean, do you find yourself kind of avoiding people
I'm I
personally?
as you've probably worked out, like I can't communicate very well. Like I stutter and I stumble over my words sometimes. People just like I hate to use the retard word, but that's how I feel inside. I've always
Uh
just
huh.
struggled to connect and make sense when I'm talking to people. Like, and that's one of the reasons that the film impacts me so much because I can relate to all of the characters, and I just want to be as close to the film as I could possibly be because I don't have that
Huh.
connection in my personal
I
life.
well, I understand what you're saying. I haven't experienced that personally. I think at the time I was just sort of excited to be around people, but sort of be removed in a way from them. But it sounds like you aren't necessarily like even wanting to be around
No,
a lot of people.
I do want
You
a
do.
connection with a human, but it's impossible
Well, why is it impossible?
because I
That's a
feel
big
like
word.
I've tried over and over, and I get to a place where I almost make friends, but it just backfires on me. And that's going
Really?
as far back as 2 years ago now. That was the last time it happened. So I've been kind of very lonely for the last 2 years, which is when I started doing this. I'm like, okay, I'll just do this now, and
Hmm.
maybe that'll fill the emptiness, which is what I see in Severin as well. She's trying to fill
Yeah,
the emptiness. You know what I mean?
yeah. Well, what's interesting too is we did that movie before social media. We did that movie before. We always say we take responsibility for Grinder because we like use that. We made up a Grinder, and it's funny. We made up that app that Jay is using, and then like 3 months later, Grinder came out, and we're like, wait a second, that's ours. And I'm always wondering, like, I wonder if that guy he like saw Shortbus and was like, huh, you never know, right? So I'm sure your world is very much like virtually. It's online. I'm sure you're mostly like using apps and probably not getting out in person so much.
You'd be surprised. I'm very new to the internet.
Are you?
I,
Okay.
I learned how to build computers before I'd even used the internet, so I've only really been using the internet for like the past 8 years or so.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
we couldn't afford anything, so we didn't have the
Okay.
internet. But just like life in general, I just got phobic of everything. I used to get beat up a lot,
Really?
so I didn't leave the house. So I
What
was
part of the what part of the UK are you in right now?
near Birmingham, where Ozzy
Oh.
Osbourne comes from.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
I was beat up a lot too, and I was bullied a lot too. I still have like nightmares of it, of being like bullied in high school. I'll still like wake up in a cold sweat, like in a panic. I don't know if that really goes away.
No. Well, do you think that you brought that into the character? Because I think the character's very lonely, like much lonelier than what you say you were.
Oh, I absolutely he was a lot more lonely than I was. It's about wanting. I mean, he was too scared to even like go out and say talk to someone, even though he was in the same room with them. Right? Yeah, yeah. He would just kind of sit by himself in the back, and so yeah, I think he was lonely. I think you're absolutely right. I think there was a lot of loneliness, and I think that's why it can be such a sad movie, and I think that's why when these people are finally like when Paul at the beginning, like he jerks off into his mouth and then like bursts into tears. That's a really profound moment. That's I mean, talk about I mean, that's saying a lot without saying anything. And that's kind of one of my favorite parts of the movie because you're like, oh wow, it's so hot. Look at how flexible he is. Oh wow. And then you kind of like get laughing at the same time too. You're like, this is outrageous. What am I watching? And then he ejaculates and then he just bursts into tears and the music stops and he's just sobbing. And you're like, okay. Now that's a sexual experience that I can relate to. I mean, I think that a lot of people can. And that
Well,
comes from and talk about and his character. I mean, talk about loneliness. Shit. I mean, he's making those sort of video diary entries because he has a hard time connecting with anyone.
do you think that your character knew that? Because you are from a distance, do you think your character knew about this like suicide video?
No, I don't think so. Not until the end. Not until he sees it for himself.
Yeah.
No, no one did in the movie. I don't think anyone really did. Even PJ, his partner.
Yeah. So, melancholic comedy, is that what you might call this?
Wow, that's a great way to describe it. It's funny because we just celebrated the 15th anniversary a couple of years ago, and that's when the Blu-ray was re-released. And we went back on the road, and we all went to New York, and we introduced it. John came to LA, and he and I introduced it in a few places because it played theatrically. I don't know if it did in the UK. Did it for the anniversary?
Probably not. I don't think so.
Okay. I mean, a few select theaters. I'm not talking like, massive, but like a few select theaters played it here in LA and New York and across a few places across the country. And I hadn't seen it really since it had come out 15 years earlier. And I forgot how funny it was. It's very, very funny. It's just chocked full. And John loves that. John loves those like one-liners, like, "Do-do, like he loves a play on words. He loves irony. He loves irreverence. So he loves these kind of, and I forget how chocked full of it is. But then you get those scenes where like Severin and James are in the closet, when they go play 7 minutes in heaven and they're sitting in the closet talking about their lives. And you're like, and it just gets so profound. And those are real elements that I know are pulled from their personal experiences as people, from Lindsay and Paul. So, and you can't fake that. So I think calling it like a melancholia comedy is absolutely perfect. That's a great way to describe it.
Okay.
I'll have to tell John that. I'm sure John will appreciate that.
Well, I've been trying to get John on for about a year. He did say, he sort of confirmed that he would do it. And then he told me
Oh,
he
okay.
was going through like a personal crisis, and then I didn't feel like I should pry into that. So I left him alone for about 8 months. But then he started posting like funny stuff on Instagram. I was like, I guess the time's good. But he doesn't respond anymore. So I was like,
Oh,
I
okay.
wonder what happened.
I'll poke him a little bit and let him know.
Yeah. Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get Lindsay on as well, because for me that is the most relatable character. Like, it's heartbreaking, but I love her as well. She's so funny. That leads me on to her name, because her name is Jennifer Aniston. Is she joking when she says that, the character? Is that a joke?
No, I think that's really her name. I think that is the character's name, yes.
And in the commentary, John Cameron says that Jennifer Aniston is a friend of the film. Like, how's that happened? Is that a joke?
No. No, I mean, no, I mean, listen, and Nicole Kidman saw the movie, and that's why Nicole Kidman hired John to direct Rabbit Hole, because Nicole Kidman was such a fan of the movie. No, there's plenty of celebrities that love this movie.
Yeah.
So wait, so going back to Lindsay though, have you contacted Lindsay?
So Instagram has changed the way that you reach out to people now.
Okay,
In some cases, like, I have to follow them, and they have to accept my follow request before I can even send them a request to chat. So now it's all
right.
got messy and confusing. I've just been getting my guest to hook me up with the next person.
I was just gonna say, if we can chat about this after the interview, but maybe I could help you reach them a little easier way, in an easier manner.
I
Yeah.
would die from like excitement.
Oh, good. Well, don't die from excitement, but yeah.
Okay, I'll try not to. But but yeah, who are you closest to from this film nowadays?
I'm actually going through my Rolodex of like people now in my mind from that movie. I'm still really close with Jay Brannon. Jay lives here in LA, and so we get to dinner. I'm probably still the closest with like Jay and John. So
Oh,
I see
okay.
them the most now.
He had a song in the movie that's one of the most incredible songs that I've ever
I
heard in my
know.
life.
His music is wonderful. He put out a bunch of albums. He doesn't really perform as much anymore, but his music is fantastic.
Oh, really? Was that though? Has he gone into acting super deep, or does he not do
No,
anything?
no, he really hasn't. He's not really much of a performer anymore. He's kind of does his own. It's a quieter life. He's not really. He didn't even want to do a lot of the press for the Shortbus 15-year reunion. He didn't want to do a lot of it. He just was kind of done with like what um um s- his singing. He was a singer, and after Short Bus, it really took off. He became really popular as a singer, and he was touring the world. He had fans. He dropped a lot of albums. He was a really big, successful singer, and I think it really burnt him out. He didn't want to be in the spotlight anymore, so he didn't really want to be around people taking his pictures anymore, and he was just sort of done with that. And that's okay.
I remember I looked up like a little Q&A with him. I think it
Yeah.
was maybe 2012, maybe just before the reissue happened,
Uh huh.
and he was saying he was very proud of his stuff on the film. So that gave me a nice feeling.
Oh, he is. Oh no, he's very proud of the film. He loves the movie. He and I just did not get along though during production, and that's funny. I can tell a story because we joke about it now, but he did not like me, and he was because Jay was kind of like a brat. Jay was a little brat on Short Bus. He was so young. He was like 22, and for some reason he just didn't like me, and he was just like, "What is he doing here?" Um, and I look back at it now and I just kind of like laughed him off, but for some reason he just didn't like me. We didn't get along, and it's funny now because now he and I are the closest. Everyone else was like a weirdo, like a New York weirdo, you know. And he was a singer, and he had like an asymmetrical mohawk, you know, and he was just bizarre, and everyone was kind of crazy, and I was just like the regular guy, and I think he just didn't like that.
Well,
He was just a brat, and he'll admit it now. He'll admit he was a brat.
when was the last time you saw Sukyin?
I talked to her, but when was the last time I saw her? Jeez, I don't know. It's been at least 10 years, unfortunately.
I
Yeah.
assumed like this was the kind of film like you mentioned like family early on. I assumed like you never lost touch with anyone that this film like would bring everybody together. And I guess it would like if you were all in the same room. I think that feeling would come back. You know what I mean?
Well, we were pretty close for the 15-year anniversary, you know, because especially in New York. New York, it was pretty much all of us except Sukyin and Raf, who was the guy who played her husband. Um, the rest of us were there. We were almost and Jay. Jay wasn't there, of course, but the rest, you know, so Justin Bond was there, and Paul and PJ and Lindsay and me and John. So that was the closest we've been to a reunion. And yeah, it does kind of feel like family. And if I ever needed to reach any of them, I know I could. But it takes work to stay in touch. I've discovered, it takes work to stay in someone's life. You got to really keep reaching out to them. I used to send birthday cards to them in the mail every year. Like I would send cards in the mail every year because I wanted to stay in touch. And I really wanted this union to remain intact. But it's something you got to work at. I've learned.
Well, since you mentioned Justin Bond, that's a name that pops up in a lot of punk rock songs. Actually,
Oh, really?
the Lunatics have mentioned him. Lesbian band Troy Bate, they bring him up.
Oh, yeah.
He's one of the funniest people in the movie. Like, was everything just improvised in the moment?
Well, it was um, until it was scripted. And once things get scripted and you're on set, and now you're shooting, there wasn't much improv. At like Justin's jokes were scripted. When we were on the day. Um, but however, she was able to like come up with them to begin with. I mean, they there was a great show called Kiki and Herb that it was Justin Bond and his partner did these live shows all over New York, and we would go watch them as we were getting ready for Shortbus, and it was just hysterical. Justin is just um, absolutely insane and brilliant and hilarious, and it shows in the movie. Yeah.
Great singer as well, with the big
Oh,
song at the end.
beautiful, beautiful singer, gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous voice. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm going to imagine there was a rap party possibly done at Dunbar or some
Yeah,
place like
of
that.
course. There was one at Delancey Lounge in New York. These are all, I'm sure, bars that don't exist anymore. Um, oh yeah, we definitely partied. We definitely enjoyed ourselves, and we all were. It was such a big collaborative, creative experience that we were celebrating throughout production, and of course afterwards. Yeah, there were plenty of parties. In fact, that's the one thing. Like when I'll go through and look at pictures, and I'll see myself like hugging PJ on a dance floor somewhere, and be like, "Where were we?" I mean, we all went to Cannes for God's sake. I mean, that was all of us got to go. That was, I mean, talk about a party. That was just a blast.
Well, let's talk about that because I don't really understand like the film process. Like, because I'm like an amateur filmmaker. I do like comedy skits, like that
Uh
kind
huh.
of thing. I used to have a skateboard video, and we did little comedy skits like that. But look, I'm curious to know like what happens once a film's done. Like, how does it go to the film festivals? Do you get picked up by somebody, or do you aspire to go there?
Well, you submit to film festivals, and they select you or they say no. I mean, it's just kind of as easy as that. And Cannes is one of the biggest ones in the world, and they selected us, and so we premiered there. We walked down that giant red carpet, that when you see everyone walking down. I mean, they were can. And then there was other, then and then it was distributed all over the world to all other film festivals. I went to the Bergen Film Festival in Norway with Lindsay. They sort like once the movie they were submitting the movie to film festivals and the film festivals started picking them up, they would sort of break us off individually and we would go and represent the movie in different areas. So like Lindsay and I went to Norway and we went to the Bergen Film Festival. And then Sukyin went somewhere else and Paul and PJ went somewhere else and Jay went somewhere else. And that's kind of how we represented the movie because it was premiering at all these festivals. Yeah, so that's how it works.
So, are you getting reviews with every showing? Like, I can imagine there's a couple of places that wouldn't show a film like this. And were any of you worried about the sex holding the film back?
Um Personally, not so much. I think we were all more like interested to see how it would play in the US, and certain like areas around the country. I was excited. I'm from Buffalo, near Buffalo, New York. So I was very excited to see if it would be picked up and played in a theater in Buffalo, and it did. So I flew there and I went and saw a screening with a bunch of my friends, and that was very exciting because like here it is playing in like my hometown. Um, but that was more when it was actually released to theaters anywhere. It's funny. I remember a review coming out when we went to Cannes, and it was sort of. I remember John always said like, don't read the reviews when they come out. They don't matter. Or blah. But then of course you have to. We all did. And I want to say there was a review that like said something sort of negative about me or something, and it was all like, "Oh my God, are you okay, Peter? Are you okay?" Like this negative review can. And I was thinking like, I don't really care. I didn't. I don't think I cared so much. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, and I can't remember. It's a long time
Well,
ago.
so once the film's finished, it goes through the rating system. Did this have to go through the traditional rating system?
No, this was. We knew this would be unrated to begin with. They would never. It would never get a rating. We knew that from the beginning. And that always hurts your movie a little bit because it's hard to distribute a movie that's unrated. But we knew it would never be rated.
Yeah. Well, I don't understand like how it got rated for the UK because it got
What does
sold
it
in a
say?
video store. You just direct me when you can see it.
Yeah, I see it. I see it. I have no idea how it works in the UK. To be totally honest, I really don't know. I don't understand how that. I didn't even know Universal had distributed it. So I don't know how that rating system works.
Yeah, so in the UK they just have to warn you it says contains strong real sex. And in Ireland because it's also got the Irish rating, it
Yeah,
doesn't say anything. It just says fit for 18 and over and that's it.
yeah,
But that's
yeah.
the UK for you. We're just like super cautious about everything.
Really?
And that's what made me think of like how it gets rated for like the film festivals,
Well,
in America.
it's also different when it's distributed theatrically versus when it's distributed like on DVD, I think. I wonder how it was rated when it was theatrical in the UK.
Yeah.
Are there different ratings for when it's like theatrical movies?
Well, I've got films like on DVD that are rated 18 for the UK, and then the Blu-ray reissues are like rated
Yeah.
15, and
Yeah.
nothing's changed except the people that are rating the films. I mean, they change and they change
Yeah.
the laws around it.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
I don't
Yeah.
know about theatricals though.
Yeah, we
And
knew this movie would be rated.
did you hear what happened to the South Park creators with their film Orgasmo?
That was NC-17, right?
Yeah, and it shouldn't
Yeah.
have been because there's not much strong language and there's actually no nudity in the film.
So why was it rated? Why did it get that rating?
Because the MPAA at the time just saw them as nobody indie filmmakers.
Oh,
They'd made a movie about porn, but it wasn't anything close to pornographic. So they just slap it with an NC-17 and push it aside, which, as you know, hurts the film. But
yeah.
once they got South Park the movie off the ground, and they were somebodies, they were able to cooperate more with the MPAA to get a
Oh, okay.
suitable rating.
Well, Orgasmo came before the South Park movie, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
was it after? It was
No,
before, yeah.
before. Yeah.
And the South Park movie was what like 2005 or something, or am I way out of?
1999.
Oh Jesus, I'm way off. Okay, because going back to the last movie I can think of like NC-17 is Showgirls, and that was 95.
I haven't seen it in like 12 years.
Oh, it's so good. It's one of my favorites.
Well, just before we wrap up, then, I was curious to know was there anything put into place to help actors feel more comfortable shooting those graphic scenes?
I mean, I remember there was John was very much like, "What can we do to make you guys feel comfortable on set? What can we do? Is there let us know? Like, we want this to be a good experience for everyone." And I remember Suk Yin, who had a scene where she was nude. She said, "You know what would make me feel good if everyone on set was nude. All the crew, the camera guys, the scripty, you, John, everybody." And John was like, "Okay." And he asked if I would be okay with it, and all the entire crew, probably like a 10-man crew, they said okay, and they all got naked, and they all sat around naked, and they shot the scene, and Sookian I think felt a lot better.
Yeah, it obviously worked out because the film turned out great.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I should ask as well. Do you think Raphael is ever going to get back into acting?
As far as I know, I don't think he's pursuing it as much anymore. He is the sweetest man in the world. I love him so much. He is just the coolest guy. And I need to reconnect with him. I mean, the last time I talked to him was during the was I was curious to see if he was going to come out for the anniversaries, and I think he went to a screening in San Francisco on his own and represented it there, but he couldn't join us in New York.
Well, let's just talk a little bit about the revival of the film. Like, whose idea was it to bring it back? Naturally, it didn't have a Blu-ray release, so that had to be one
Right,
reason.
right. It's my understanding it was Oscilloscope. Oscilloscope was that the film company that picked it up and distributed it and reissued it. And how that came about, I don't know. I just remember Oscilloscope said, we Shortbus is ours now. We're going to celebrate it. We're going to re-release it. There's going to be a huge merchandise line, and there was. It was a whole that they were selling T-shirts and tote bags and lube and candles, and those they sold the record, the vinyl of the soundtrack, which I have somewhere, and it was. Then they had the new artwork, and it was this big celebration of the 15th anniversary. Um, but how Oscilloscope picked it up, I don't know. That'd be Howard, the producer, that would know about that.
Were you involved in the new commentary track?
No, it was just John and Howard.
Yeah, I'm still so excited about that one. But
Oh, the new commentary. Yeah.
yeah. Well, do you still see John as your director? Because he's quite an impactful person, I think. And I was so happy for him for when he got onto that Tiger thing with Kate McKinnon. I was like,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
he should be playing the lead in something.
Yeah. He's still a very close friend of mine. Do I consider him a direct? No, not anymore. No, he's just my friend now. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was kind of intimidating meeting him at first because Hedwig was such a big deal. Um, but I also knew, it's funny. I remember I remember reading about this for the first time, the sexfilmproject.com, hearing about it, and I remember thinking to myself, I'm gonna do this movie. I just knew it. I knew it in my gut. I knew that I was going to be involved in this movie. I knew it. So even when I was cast, it wasn't that big of a surprise. It was kismet. It was like timing. I just knew that this movie was exactly what I was needed to do at the time. So John being involved was just like a cherry on top, that was just, and we all just had faith in him. We all had faith in him. We knew he was going to make an amazing movie. So it was all like, I'm going to have blind faith in you right now. I think a lot of us had that.
Yeah. So, are there any plans to work with John again in the future? Is he maybe going to try and bring you onto one of his projects? Are you aspiring for that?
I mean, please, from your mouth to God's ear. John, do you hear this? You hear this? Hire me again. Of course, I'd love to work with John again. I mean, he's on a roll. He's very successful. He's killing it right now. So he's busy. He's busy. But I don't think he's directed anything since How to Talk to Girls at Parties. I don't know if you saw that movie. Did you see that movie?
Yeah, I
It was
think
good.
that
I
was the
liked it.
last movie, but I know
Yeah,
he's done a lot of TV stuff lately as well.
yeah. I think that was the last movie he's directed. Actually just sent me a play that he's working on. He wanted me to read it and give him some feedback, and I did. So he's working on that right now. He's always doing something. You don't got to
Yeah.
worry about him.
He's a wonderful man, and hopefully
Oh, he's
I
the
can
best.
actually get him on here. Hopefully you can help me out with that.
I'll help you out. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Thanks so much
Sure.
for doing this, man. This has been exciting to talk to you. I love
My
this movie.
pleasure. Oh man, I love it too. It's nice to kind of remember it again because I have to remember how just incredible it is. You know, it's fun to talk about. It was
Yeah.
a fun experience. It was only a positive experience for me.
And a happy 20th anniversary to Shortbus for when that finally
Yes.
happens. Couple of months'
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Well, it'd be 20 years for the production, but it came out in 2006. So next year will be like the 20th of its actual release. Yeah.
Yeah. We're celebrating anyway.
We're celebrating anyway, even though, yeah, it'll be this summer was when we were in there shooting, sweating with lube all over our hands. It was a hot summer.
Well, hopefully this film lives on to see a
It will.
30th, 40th anniversary.
I hope so.
Yeah, dude. Hopefully you can come back on as well, like somewhere down the line.
Sure.
If we get...
I'd be happy to. If you ever want to talk horror or something, I'm always down to talk.
Oh, dude, we could fan out over Gremlins too.
Yeah, we could. I mean, if you want to do a Gremlins 2 episode, it'd be fantastic. I could definitely pull out a lot of my stuff for Gremlins 2. I have a lot of merch and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, that's badass. We should absolutely do that. That's definitely
Okay.
happening. Okay. And
Okay.
yeah, please help me out with John and with Lindsay.
Okay.
If you can.
My pleasure, yeah.
All right, man. Thank you so much for doing this, dude. This was so fun talking to you.
All right, buddy. Hey, that was a blast. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Bye, man.